When a man attempts to humiliate the woman he left, he arrives in a flashy new Ferrari with a younger woman on his arm. He expects to find his ex-wife, Amelia, heartbroken and regretful. What he doesn't know is that Amelia has a secret, a new relationship with a quiet billionaire who sees her worth. While the ex-husband flaunts a sports car, his former wife has just been gifted a 150-foot super yacht. This is not simply a story of revenge, but of karma, and the profound moment a man realizes he didn't just lose a wife, he lost an empire. The conference room at Dalton Finch & Associates was a mausoleum of polished mahogany and silent judgment. Sunlight, thick with the dust of settled arguments, struggled through the tinted 40th floor windows, illuminating the grim finality of the scene. For Amelia Hayes, it felt less like a liberation and more like an amputation. The document in front of her, a crisp, multi-page monstrosity of legalese, was the official death certificate of her 14-year marriage. Across the table, Mark Sterling, her soon-to-be ex-husband, didn't look at her. His focus was entirely on his phone, his thumb flicking across the screen with an air of bored importance. He wore a Brioni suit that cost more than Amelia's first car, his salt-and-pepper hair perfectly coiffed. He was the picture of success, a man whose ambition had become a living, breathing entity that had long ago consumed the charming, funny man she had fallen in love with. If you could just sign on page 7, Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Dalton Mark's lawyer, said, his voice a dry rustle of paper. The use of her married name, for what would be the last time in any official capacity, was a casual cruelty that twisted in her gut. Amelia picked up the heavy, gold-plated pen. Her hand trembled slightly. She could feel Mark's impatience radiating across the table, a familiar, oppressive heat. He cleared his throat, a small, sharp sound of annoyance. "Amelia, we don't have all day," he said, finally looking up. His eyes, once warm and full of shared laughter, were now cold, grey stones. "I have a tea time at Greenwich Country Club at 3. The mention of the club was a deliberate jab. It was their club, the social nexus of their married life, a place where she had hosted fundraisers and chaired committees, building the social scaffolding that supported his corporate ladder. Now, it was just another asset he had won. She signed her name. The ink, a stark funereal black, sealed the deal. Amelia Hayes. It looked foreign, a name she hadn't used in over a decade. "It's done," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Mark gave a curt nod, already standing and shrugging into his suit jacket. "Excellent. My office will have the settlement wired to your account by end of day." "It's more than generous, Amelia. It should keep you comfortable." Comfortable. The word was an insult. He spoke as if he was settling a tab, not dissolving a life they had built together. He was giving her money to go away, to disappear from the new gleaming life he was already constructing. A life that included Tiffany Vance. Tiffany was 26, a brand influencer with surgically perfect features and a voracious appetite for the lifestyle Mark could provide. Amelia had seen the pictures, paparazzi shots of them leaving exclusive Manhattan restaurants, their faces alight with flashbulbs. Mark, who had always claimed to hate the limelight, was now basking in it. As Mark and his lawyer began packing their briefcases, Amelia remained seated, a statue of disbelief. 14 years. She had supported him through business school, celebrated his first big promotion, held his hand at his father's funeral. She had managed their homes, raised their 2 children now away at boarding school, shielded from the worst of the fallout, and curated a social life that made him the envy of his peers. She had been the perfect corporate wife, and her reward was to be traded in for a newer model. Mark paused at the door, turning back to her with an expression that was almost pitying, which was worse than the anger. "Listen, Amelia," he began, adopting the patronizing tone he used when explaining things he assumed were beyond her comprehension. "This is for the best. You were never truly cut out for this world. The pressure, the expectations, it's a lot. You can go back to your painting, open that little gallery you always talked about. Live a simpler life. You'll be happier, trust me." He was releasing her, not as an equal, but as a subordinate. He was benevolently downsizing. He was framing her dismissal as a gift. The audacity of it stole her breath. She finally found her voice, a flicker of the fire he had tried so hard to extinguish. "The world we built, Mark. You seem to forget I was the architect of half of it." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He hated being reminded of his more humble beginnings, of the days when her father's connections had opened doors for him. "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed. "It's over. Let's be civilized." He turned to leave, then stopped one last time. "Oh, and Tiffany and I are officially engaged. We're having a small get-together at the club on Saturday. Obviously, you're not invited, but I thought you should know. We don't want things to be awkward." And then he was gone. The silence he left behind was heavier than the one before. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of broken promises. Amelia stared at the skyline of New York City, a view that had once made her feel powerful and on top of the world. Now, it just looked like 1,000 windows into lives that were not her own. She had been relegated to the role of spectator in the life she had helped create. Her phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Cleo. "Is it done?" the text read. Amelia typed back a single word. "Done." The reply was instantaneous. "My place. Now. I have 3 bottles of Veuve Clicquot and 0 judgment." Driving her aging Range Rover, the car Mark had always called sensible, while he drove a new Porsche every year back to the now too large house in Greenwich she had to sell, Amelia felt a profound emptiness. Mark's words echoed in her mind. You were never truly cut out for this world. Had he been right? Had she just been playing a part all these years? The thought was terrifying. She had poured her entire identity into being Mrs. Sterling. Without it, who was Amelia Hayes? That evening, sitting in Cleo's art-filled Soho loft, the city lights twinkling below, Amelia recounted the final brutal scene. Cleo, a fiery art dealer who had never been impressed by Mark's corporate bluster, listened intently, her expression hardening with every word. "He said you weren't cut out for it," Cleo seethed, pouring another glass of champagne. "That gaslighting son of a bitch. You hosted senators in your living room, Amelia. You charmed the board of directors when his billion-dollar merger was on the line. He didn't just marry you, he acquired you. You were his greatest asset." Was Amelia said the word, tasting like ash. "Now I'm just a liability. He's written off." "No," Cleo said, grabbing her hand. "You're a masterpiece he was too stupid to understand. He only ever saw the frame. Now you're free. It hurts like hell, I know. But this isn't an ending, Ames. It's an emancipation." Amelia wanted to believe her. She truly did. But as she stared out at the glittering city, all she could feel was the vast, terrifying echo of the space Mark had left behind. He had taken the life and left her with the lifestyle's empty shell. And he was right about one thing. She had to build something new. But she had no blueprint, no materials, and no idea where to even begin. The months that followed the divorce were a blur of beige boxes and legal documents. Amelia sold the Greenwich mansion, a painful process of cataloguing a life's worth of memories and possessions. She moved into a modest but elegant townhouse in a quieter part of the city, a place that was hers and hers alone. It was a blank canvas, and for the first time in a long time, the emptiness felt less like a void and more like a possibility. Following Cleo's advice, she threw herself back into the one passion she had sacrificed at the altar of Mark's ambition, art history, and restoration. Before her marriage, she had been a promising intern at the Met, her hands and mind skilled at discerning the hidden stories beneath layers of varnish and time. She enrolled in a masterclass on Renaissance art restoration, a small intensive course held in a private atelier. It was there, amidst the scent of turpentine and linseed oil, that her life took a turn she never could have anticipated. The atelier was run by a notoriously cantankerous but brilliant restorer named Dr. Alistair Finch. One afternoon, while Amelia was meticulously cleaning a 17th-century portrait, the heavy oak door creaked open. A man stepped inside, and the atmosphere in the room subtly shifted. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a way that whispered wealth, rather than screamed it, a cashmere sweater, tailored trousers and shoes that had clearly never touched a puddle. He had dark hair, a strong jawline, and eyes the color of warm whiskey that held a startling intelligence. Dr. Finch, who usually grunted at everyone, immediately stood up. "Julio, I wasn't expecting you." "Alistair," the man Julio said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. "I was in the neighborhood. Wanted to see how the Caravaggio study is coming along." Slowly. "The fool who owned it before you kept it in a damp cellar," Finch grumbled, leading him towards a cordoned-off section. Amelia tried to focus on her work, but she couldn't help but overhear their conversation. The man Julio spoke with a quiet authority and a deep, genuine knowledge of art. He wasn't a collector who just wrote checks. He understood the brushstrokes, the history, the soul of the pieces. As he was about to leave, his gaze drifted across the room and landed on Amelia and the portrait she was working on. He paused. "That's a lovely piece," he said, his eyes scanning the canvas. "Studio of Van Honthorst." Amelia was taken aback. Most people wouldn't have recognized the obscure Dutch painter's style. "Yes, that's the attribution we're working with," she replied, surprised by her own steady voice. "The lighting is characteristic of the Utrecht Caravaggisti." He walked closer, his interest piqued. "You're very skilled. Your touch is incredibly delicate." He looked from the painting to her, and for the first time, in what felt like a lifetime, she felt seen. Not as Mark Sterling's wife, not as a hostess or a socialite, but as a person with a skill and a passion. "Thank you," she said, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "Julio Vance," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Amelia Hayes," she replied. The name Vance was familiar, but she couldn't immediately place it. He smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes. "It's a pleasure, Amelia Hayes." And then, with a nod to Dr. Finch, he was gone. The next week, a courier delivered a small, flat package to her townhouse. Inside was a beautifully bound book on the conservation of Dutch Golden Age paintings. The inscription on the first page read, "For a delicate touch. Perhaps we could discuss it over dinner sometime. Julio Vance." Below it was his personal phone number. Amelia's heart did a nervous flutter. She Googled his name. The results were staggering. Julio Vance was not just a wealthy art collector. He was the Julio Vance, CEO of Vance Global, a diversified technology and green energy firm worth billions. He was a titan of industry, but a famously private one. Unlike Mark, whose existence seemed to be validated by mentions in the society pages, Julio Vance was rarely photographed. The articles about him focused on his business acumen, his visionary investments in sustainable technology, and his massive anonymous philanthropic contributions. He was old money, a Rockefeller, or a Carnegie for the 21st century, a man whose wealth was so vast it had become an abstract concept. She was intimidated, but also intrigued. She called him. Their first date was not at a flashy Michelin-starred restaurant designed to be seen in. He took her to a tiny, family-owned Italian place in the West Village that he'd been going to for years. The conversation flowed effortlessly. He asked about her life, her children, her passion for art, and he listened, truly listened to her answers. He spoke of his own life, with a refreshing lack of ego, sharing stories of his travels and his excitement for a new solar energy project in a developing country. He was nothing like Mark. Where Mark was loud, Julio was quiet. Where Mark demanded attention, Julio gave it. Where Mark saw people as assets, Julio saw them as individuals. Over the next few months, a slow, beautiful romance bloomed. He never rushed her. He understood the trauma of her divorce and gave her the space to heal. He courted her in an old-fashioned way, with museum dates, long walks in Central Park, and quiet evenings at his stunning penthouse overlooking the park where they would talk for hours. He loved her mind, her passion, her resilience. He found her stories of raising her children and managing her former life not as trivial wife duties, but as evidence of her incredible strength and intelligence. "You weren't just a corporate wife, Amelia," he told her one evening, his hand covering hers. "You were the CEO of a very complex domestic and social enterprise." Mark was a fool not to see that. It was a validation she hadn't realized she desperately needed. With Julio, she felt her old self slowly re-emerging, but stronger, more confident, and stripped of the need for external approval. She started a small art consultancy firm, advising young collectors, and it was quickly becoming a success, thanks in no small part to the quiet introductions Julio would make on her behalf. One sunny afternoon in late May, they were lounging on the terrace of his penthouse. Julio handed her a flute of champagne. "I have something for you," he said, a playful glint in his eye. He handed her a small, elegant navy blue box. Amelia's stomach tightened. Was it jewelry? She wasn't ready for that. Mark had used jewelry as an apology, a transaction. She opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was not a necklace or a ring, but a small, intricately engraved platinum card. On it was a single word, serenity. She looked at him confused. He smiled. "I know you've been working so hard, and I know the summer in the city can be draining. I thought we could get away. Monaco, perhaps. The Greek Isles. This is a key card," she asked, still not understanding. In a manner of speaking, he said, his smile widening. "It's for your new yacht. I decided to name her Serenity, because that's what you've brought to my life." Amelia stared at him speechless. A yacht. Not a share in a yacht. Not a weekend on a chartered boat. Her own yacht. She knew Julio was wealthy, but this was a level of extravagance she couldn't comprehend. It was a gesture so grand, so far beyond the realm of anything she had ever experienced, that she could only laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock and joy. "Julio, that's insane," she finally managed to say. "Is it?" he asked, his expression soft and serious. "I don't think so. It's just a boat, Amelia. A comfortable way for us to see the world together. The real gift is you. This is just an accessory." And in that moment she understood the difference between Mark and Julio. For Mark, a gift was a symbol of his own success, something for the recipient to display as proof of his value. For Julio, a gift was an expression of his affection, a tool to create shared happiness. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. She felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling of being cherished, not for what she could do for a man's image, but for who she was. The echo of emptiness that had haunted her for so long was finally, blessedly silent. It had been replaced by the quiet, steady hum of a happy and contented heart. The annual Sterling Foundation Charity Polo Classic was the crown jewel of the Greenwich summer social season. It had been Amelia's brainchild, an event she had built from a modest fundraiser into a powerhouse that attracted old money families, new money titans, and a healthy sprinkling of B-list celebrities. It was also, she knew, the perfect stage for Mark's particular brand of theater. When the engraved invitation arrived, she had intended to throw it away. Attending would be like voluntarily walking into the lion's den. But Julio, ever perceptive, had seen it differently. "You should go," he'd said calmly over breakfast. "You built that event. It's part of your legacy. Why should you let him make you feel like an exile in your own town? It will be a spectacle, Julio. Mark will make sure of it. Then let's give them a spectacle they aren't expecting." He'd replied with a quiet smile. "Let's not hide. Let's just be." And so, on a brilliant, cloudless Saturday in June, Amelia found herself driving back through the familiar stone gates of the Greenwich Polo Club. But this time, she was in the passenger seat of Julio's Aston Martin DB11, a car of such understated classic elegance that it made flashy sports cars look vulgar. She wore a simple cream-colored silk dress and a wide-brimmed hat, an outfit that spoke of confidence, not desperation. She felt calm, centered, and for the first time in a long time, genuinely happy. They were a picture of quiet grace, and their arrival did not go unnoticed. As they stepped out of the car, a hush fell over the chattering groups on the manicured lawn. Heads turned. Whispers erupted like brush fires. Amelia Hayes was back, and no one knew who the impossibly handsome, distinguished man by her side was. They found a table near the field, and Julio, ever the gentleman, procured 2 glasses of champagne. He was a master of invisibility when he chose to be content to observe his presence, a silent, solid support for Amelia. It didn't take long for Mark to spot them. Amelia saw him making his way across the lawn, a predator stalking his prey. On his arm was Tiffany, poured into a garishly bright pink dress that was at least one size too small. She clutched a tiny yapping dog in one arm and a bejeweled phone in the other. But it wasn't Tiffany or the dog that Mark was showcasing. It was his arrival. Just moments before, a car had roared up the private drive, its engine an obnoxious scream for attention. A canary yellow Ferrari, 812, super fast. Now Mark was leading Tiffany towards them, a smug, triumphant smirk plastered on his face. He was holding the Ferrari's key fob, dangling it from his finger like a conquest's scalp. "Amelia, I'm surprised to see you here," he said, his voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. He was performing. "I didn't think this would be your scene anymore." "Hello, Mark," Amelia replied, her voice even. She didn't stand. "You remember how much work I put into this event. I wanted to see it was still running smoothly." Mark's smirk tightened. He gestured vaguely at Julio. "And you've brought a friend." "Mark Sterling, this is Julio Vance," Amelia said, making the introduction. At the mention of the name, a flicker of confusion, then dawning recognition, crossed Mark's face. He knew the name, of course. Vance Global was a legend, but he couldn't place the man. Julio Vance was a ghost, a name in the Financial Times, not a face at a polo match. Mark's brain visibly short-circuited. Julio simply nodded, his expression unreadable. Sterling, Tiffany oblivious, jumped into the silence. "Oh my God, Amelia, your dress is so classic," she said, the word classic sounding like an insult, a synonym for old. "Mark just got me the most amazing present. Did you see it, the Ferrari? It's the superfast model, 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. She looked expectantly at Amelia, hungry for a reaction, for a sliver of envy. Mark puffed out his chest. "A little engagement present. Tiffany has expensive tastes, but well, she's worth it. Have to keep my girl happy." He glanced at Amelia, his eyes delivering the intended message. "This is what you could have had. This is what you lost. A man who can afford to buy his fiancée a $500,000 car." Amelia felt a wave of something, not jealousy, but pity. It was all so transparent, so desperately sad. The car wasn't a gift of love, it was a press release. She smiled, a small, serene smile. "It's very yellow, Tiffany. I'm sure you'll have fun with it." Her calm, non-reactive response clearly infuriated Mark. He had expected tears, anger, a dramatic scene. He wasn't getting it. He decided to double down. "So Vance," Mark said, turning his full condescending attention to Julio. "What do you do?" "Finance, real estate." He was sizing him up, trying to slot him into the familiar hierarchy of wealth he understood. Before Julio could answer, Amelia placed a hand on his arm. "Julio is in the technology sector," she said simply. "Tech, eh?" Mark scoffed. "Lots of overnight millionaires in tech. Flash in the pan. You have to have staying power in this world." It was at that moment that a mutual acquaintance, a garrulous real estate mogul named Bill Peterson, wandered over. Mark Great Party Bill boomed. Then he saw Julio, and his jaw practically hit the grass. "Julio Vance, my God, man! What on earth are you doing here? I thought you only left your ivory tower for Bilderberg meetings." The entire table went silent. Mark's face, which had been a mask of smug superiority, froze. The blood drained from it, leaving a pasty, slack-jawed expression of pure shock. Julio Vance. The Julio Vance. It was him. It was real. Bill, oblivious to the drama he had just detonated, clapped Julio on the back. "So, Amelia, you snagged the white whale. Good for you. Last I heard, this guy was launching a new satellite. Now he's at a polo match. You're a miracle worker." Mark stared at Julio, then at Amelia, his mind racing, trying to process the impossible. Julio Vance wasn't just rich, he was in a different stratosphere. Mark's Ferrari, the symbol of his ultimate triumph, suddenly looked like a child's toy. Tiffany, sensing the dramatic shift in power dynamics, but not understanding it, looked confused. "What's a Bilderberg?" she whispered to Mark. He ignored her, his eyes still locked on Amelia. Julio, seeing Amelia's discomfort, decided to end the excruciating encounter. He stood up, pulling Amelia gently to her feet. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Sterling," he said, his voice level, but with an unmistakable air of dismissal. "But Amelia and I have a flight to catch this evening. We're taking a little trip to get away from it all." Mark found his voice, a strangled croaking sound. A trip where Julio smiled, a cool, effortless smile that held no malice, only fact. Monaco first, then a slow cruise through the Aegean. The crew has been getting the new boat ready for her maiden voyage. He glanced at Amelia with pure affection. "Amelia needs some serenity." He let the name of the yacht hang in the air. Serenity. Mark Sterling, a basic who prided himself on his quick wit and unshakable composure, could only stand there, his mouth slightly agape. The $500,000 Ferrari key fob suddenly felt heavy and pathetic in his hand. He had come here today to flaunt a sports car in front of the woman he'd discarded. And in return, with no malice or fanfare, she had revealed that her new partner hadn't just bought her a toy, he had bought her an ocean. As Amelia and Julio walked away, a trail of stunned silence in their wake, Amelia didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel the crushing weight of Mark's collapsed ego from across the lawn. The spectacle had happened just as Julio predicted, but the star of the show hadn't been Mark and his shiny car. It had been Amelia and her quiet, unshakable, and unbelievably magnificent new reality. The image of Amelia walking away with Julio Vance burned itself into Mark's retina. It played on a loop in his mind for the rest of the polo match, a nightmarish reel of his own public castration. Every polite smile he offered felt like a grimace. Every conversation was a fog of meaningless words. He saw it when he finally got behind the wheel of the canary yellow Ferrari, the car he had leased with a ruinous monthly payment specifically for moments like this. He gunned the engine, and its ferocious high-pitched roar, which hours ago had sounded like the clarion call of victory, now seemed like the pathetic shriek of a wounded animal. It was loud, obnoxious, and utterly impotent. The quiet, effortless way Julio had said Sterling held more power than this entire machine. That night was a descent into a private hell of his own making. While Tiffany passed out in their bed, exhausted from the social performance and champagne, Mark sat in the stark, minimalist home office he'd designed to look like the command center of a master of the universe. The blue glow of his laptop screen was an unforgiving spotlight on his face, illuminating his frantic, obsessive digging. He didn't just Google Julio Vance. He leveraged his firm's expensive intelligence subscriptions, diving into global financial archives, corporate ownership records, and deep web news aggregators. The results didn't just confirm his fears, they dwarfed them into insignificance. Vance Global was more than a company, it was a sovereign entity. He read about its orbital satellite network, providing encrypted communication for allied governments. He saw schematics for fully automated deep-sea mining operations. He scrolled through press releases on Vance-funded breakthroughs in genomic sequencing and AI-driven pharmaceutical research. This wasn't a man who bought companies. This was a man who built and owned the foundational technologies of the next century. Mark had spent his life playing checkers with other people's money, and he had just tried to puff out his chest at a grandmaster who was playing three-dimensional chess with the future of the planet. A sickening wave of vertigo washed over him. He felt like a man who had proudly announced his purchase of a new hill, only to discover it sat in the shadow of Mount Everest. He scrolled until he found an article in an obscure yachting magazine detailing the launch of the Serenity, built by Lürsen in Germany. A hybrid electric propulsion system, a state-of-the-art laboratory for marine biology research requested by the new owner, a crew of 12, including a Michelin-starred chef. The estimated cost, the article noted, was likely well over $60 million, but the true price was undisclosed, as is common with projects of that scale. Mark's entire net worth, a figure he had polished and inflated and leveraged to its breaking point, was somewhere around 15 million. It was a number that had made him a king in Greenwich. Here, in the context of Julio Vance, it made him a pauper. He wasn't even in the same sport, let alone the same league. The poison of this realization began to seep into every corner of his life. The obsession became a constant humming background noise to his every thought. The next week, at his firm, Chamberlain Capital, The unraveling began in earnest. They were in the final stages of acquiring a mid-sized logistics company, a deal Mark was spearheading. It was supposed to be a straightforward, if sizable, acquisition. In the main conference room, surrounded by his team of bright, hungry analysts, Mark couldn't focus. The opposing counsel kept mentioning their parent company's recent partnership with a green energy initiative, a small but promising venture funded by a subsidiary of Vance Global. The name was a branding iron to his psyche. Each mention was a fresh sear on his ego. Their debt load seems unusually structured, Mark, a young analyst named Dante, noted, pointing to a clause buried deep in the appendices. This provision here, it almost looks like a poison pill if a new owner changes their green energy supplier. Mark, who hadn't really been listening, waved a dismissive hand. It's boilerplate, Dante, a negotiating tactic. They're trying to spook us. We're the leverage here. Don't forget that. We crushed them on this. He was thinking of Julio's dismissive nod. He needed to crush someone, anyone, to feel that power again. But sir, if Vance's subsidiary is the supplier in question, Vance is irrelevant here. Mark snapped, his voice far too loud for the room. The analysts exchanged nervous glances. Mark Sterling, the Iceman, was losing his cool. I've reviewed the top-line numbers. The asset is solid. We push it through. Now. He was overriding his team. His gut, his own training, driven by a desperate, pathetic need to post a win. 2 weeks after the deal closed, the bomb detonated. The poison pill was real. Chamberlain Capital was suddenly on the hook for $90 million in accelerated debt payments. The logistics company was a Trojan horse, and Mark had personally wheeled it inside the gates. Arthur Chamberlain's office felt like a walk to the gallows. Chamberlain, a man whose face seemed carved from granite, didn't yell. It was worse. He spoke with the quiet, chilling precision of a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. I built this firm on due diligence, Mark Chamberlain said, sliding the damning file across his polished desk. I built it on trusting the fine print, more than the handshake. You blew through every red flag your team raised. You ignored a clause a summer intern should have caught. This wasn't a mistake. This was arrogance. This was a catastrophic failure of judgment. Mark started to offer his pathetic excuses. The data was misleading, Arthur. They buried it. Don't Chamberlain cut him off, holding up a hand. I've already spoken to Dante. He flagged the specific clause for you twice. Your head isn't here, Mark. It hasn't been since the polo event. The whispers are all over the street. You're distracted, volatile. He leaned forward. Take a leave of absence, effective immediately. I'll handle the board. You go and get your house in order. We'll reevaluate in 3 months, if there's anything left to reevaluate. Being put on leave was the corporate equivalent of being excommunicated. It was a public shaming. Within hours, the news was all over the insular world of high finance. Mark Sterling, the golden boy, had been benched. The financial pressure mounted with terrifying speed. A few days later, a call from his private banker at Goldman Sachs delivered the next blow. Mark, we have a problem. The market dip combined with the hit your firm's stock took has triggered a margin call on your personal portfolio. We need you to deposit $2.8 million by tomorrow, or we'll be forced to start liquidating your positions. Mark felt the blood drain from his face. He didn't have a spare $2.8 million. He would have to sell. He'd be forced to realize massive losses on the very stocks he had leveraged to build his paper fortune. It was the beginning of a death spiral. The facade at home crumbled just as quickly. The illusion of infinite wealth was a drug Tiffany was happily addicted to, and she was beginning to suffer withdrawal. One evening, she waltzed in, swinging shopping bags from Cartier and Chanel. "Look what I got," she chirped, pulling out a diamond-encrusted bracelet. "It's to match the Ferrari." Something in Mark's overstressed psyche finally tore open. "Are you insane?" he roared, snatching the box from her hand. "This is $100,000. $100,000. The money doesn't grow on trees." Tiffany stared at him, her perfectly made-up face contorting in disbelief and disgust. "Where is this coming from? You're the one who told me to just point at what I want. You said you were a king." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. "What happened to the king? Did your frumpy ex-wife and her new sugar daddy scare him away? This has nothing to do with Amelia," he bellowed, the lie sounding flimsy even to his own ears. "Doesn't it?" Tiffany shot back, her voice dripping venom. She took a step closer, her eyes cold and hard. "You've been a ghost for weeks. You sit in that office all night staring at pictures of that stupid boat. You think I don't know? You told me all about him. The satellites, the secret labs, you're obsessed with him, and you're jealous of her. It's pathetic, Mark. You wanted an alpha, you got one, and now you can't handle it. You're not an alpha. You're just a bully who got put in his place." Every word was a perfectly aimed dagger. She was using his own obsessive research as a weapon against him. She was voicing his deepest, most secret fears. The word hung in the air between them, unspoken but deafening loser. His rage and shame coalesced into a single, trembling command. "Get out!" Gladly she sneered, snatching the jewelry box back. "This whole act is getting boring anyway." She grabbed her purse and the keys to the Ferrari from the bowl by the door. "I'm going to stay with friends in the city, and I'm taking the car. At least, it still knows how to perform." He didn't move. He just watched from the massive floor-to-ceiling window as the yellow sports car, the ultimate symbol of his supposed victory, tore out of his driveway, driven by a woman who despised him. The sound of the engine faded, leaving a profound and terrifying silence. He was alone. Alone in a house he could no longer afford, with a career in ruins, a fiancée who had abandoned him, and a mountain of debt that threatened to bury him. He had been so consumed with the idea of winning, so focused on the public spectacle of shaming Amelia, that he had failed to see he was playing a completely different game. It wasn't about money or status, it was about substance. And he had none. He sank onto a $1,000 sofa, the weight of his own colossal failure pressing down on him, and for the first time since he was a child, Mark Sterling felt the hot, shameful sting of tears. The unraveling was complete. All that was left was the fall. The fall was not a sudden, dramatic plummet. It was a slow, grinding descent into a new and terrifying reality defined by silence. The cavernous Greenwich house, once a stage for boisterous dinner parties and power brokering, became an echo chamber for Mark's failures. The ringing of the telephone, which had once been a constant Pavlovian symphony of his own importance, ceased almost entirely. The calls he did get were from men with cold voices and colder intentions, his banker at Goldman Sachs informing him that his portfolio had been liquidated at a catastrophic loss to meet the margin call. A representative from the Ferrari leasing company, politely but firmly, inquiring about the 2 missed payments and the vehicle's current location. An increasingly impatient real estate agent telling him the market was soft and he needed to drop the asking price on the house again. Each call was a hammer blow, methodically dismantling the life he had built. He started the process of selling his things. The Patek Philippe watch collection, which he had once seen as a tangible measure of his ascent, went first. He met the dealer in a sterile private room, laying out the timepieces he had acquired at each milestone of his career. The dealer, a man with practiced indifference, examined them under a loupe, named a price that was a fraction of their value, and slid a cashier's check across the table. Mark took it without negotiation. The fight had gone out of him. He was no longer a predator, he was carrion, and the scavengers were circling. He began to let the house go. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams that slanted across the Italian marble floors. A thin film of grime settled on the baccarat crystal. The infinity pool in the backyard turned a murky shade of green. He was a ghost, haunting the museum of his former life. One afternoon, the final humiliation arrived. A tow truck, large and brutally functional, backed into his sweeping circular driveway. Tiffany, it turned out, had abandoned the Ferrari in a parking garage at JFK after a whirlwind healing trip to St. Bart's, which was being meticulously documented on her Instagram. The leasing company had tracked it down. Mark watched through the window as a beefy man in greasy overalls expertly winched the canary yellow symbol of his hubris onto the flatbed. It looked absurdly out of place, a gaudy, ridiculous toy being hauled away as junk. As the truck pulled away, Mark felt not anger, but a profound, hollow emptiness. He had traded his wife, his integrity, and his career for that car, and now it was gone. Thousands of miles away, the Aegean Sea was a brilliant, impossible blue. The Serenity was anchored in a secluded cove off the coast of Santorini, the island's famous whitewashed villages cascading down the cliffside like a spill of sugar cubes. Amelia stood on the aft deck, a gentle breeze stirring her hair. She wore a simple white linen dress, her feet bare on the warm teak. She was sketching in a charcoal pad, capturing the play of light on the water. Julio came up behind her, placing a cool glass of iced tea on the table beside her. He didn't speak, just wrapped his arms around her waist and rested his chin on her shoulder, looking at her drawing. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. "You capture the movement." "It's easy when the subject is this perfect," she replied, leaning back against him. The comfort between them was easy, unforced. With Mark, every moment of leisure had felt like a scheduled performance of relaxation. With Julio, it was simply a state of being. Her phone sitting on the table buzzed. It was Cleo. Amelia smiled and answered, putting it on speaker. "Don't tell me," Cleo's voice crackled through. "You're calling from your golden chariot while dolphins sing you ancient Greek poetry." Amelia laughed. "Something like that. We're in Santorini. It's breathtaking." "Well, hold on to your sun hat, because the schadenfreude over here is off the charts," Cleo said, her tone shifting. "You're not going to believe the latest on Mark." Amelia's smile faded slightly. She glanced at Julio, who gave her a supportive squeeze. "What now, Cleo?" "He's been officially terminated, not on leave, fired. The $90 million screw-up was worse than anyone knew. Arthur Chamberlain had to issue a public statement and a correction to their quarterly earnings. The board was calling for Mark's head on a platter." Amelia closed her eyes. Fired. The word seemed impossible when associated with the man she had known, a man whose entire identity was fused to his career. "And it gets better," Cleo continued, warming to her subject. "Tiffany dumped him, of course, but get this, she's plastered her Instagram with a whole new beginnings narrative. Posts about cutting out toxic energy and knowing your worth. She's somehow rebranding his collapse as her female empowerment journey. The nerve is almost admirable." Amelia felt a strange pang. It wasn't happiness at his misfortune. It was a deep, aching sadness for the shell of a man he had become. The ambitious, driven man she had once loved was now a punchline. "That's awful," she said quietly. "Awful. It's karma with a cherry on top. He put the for sale sign up on the Greenwich house last week. A friend in real estate told me he's underwater on the mortgage. He's going to lose millions." Julio listened, his expression neutral, but his eyes full of concern for Amelia. When the call ended, he turned her around to face him. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though a tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "It's just sad, Julio. I spent 14 years with him. I know I'm better off and I'm happier than I've ever been. But I never wished for this. I never wanted him to be destroyed." "I know you didn't," he said gently, wiping the tear away with his thumb. "You have too much grace for that. What he did was self-inflicted. His life was a house of cards built on ego. All it took was a single gust of wind to bring it all down." She looked out at the serene blue water, at the almost mythic beauty surrounding her. She had escaped the collapsing house. She was safe. She was cherished. The gratitude she felt was so immense it was almost painful. She was free. Mark's world had shrunk to the size of a bar stool. He'd found a dark, nameless tavern in Port Chester, a place where no one wore a blazer and the whiskey was cheap. It was anonymous. It was perfect. He spent his days there nursing a drink, the television in the corner, a constant flickering distraction from the roaring silence in his head. He was in the process of selling the house to a developer for land value, a deal that would barely cover his debts. He was renting a sterile one-bedroom apartment in a sprawling complex that smelled of stale cooking and regret. His Savile Row suits hung in the cramped closet like relics from another civilization. One evening, nursing his third bourbon, he was scrolling through a financial news app on his phone, a masochistic habit he couldn't break. A headline jumped out at him, and the glass nearly slipped from his hand. "Vance Global Subsidiary acquires distressed debt portfolio from Chamberlain Capital." He clicked on the article, his heart pounding. It was clinical, devoid of emotion, a strategic acquisition by a Vance-owned investment fund. They had purchased a portfolio of underperforming assets for pennies on the dollar. The article specifically mentioned the debt from the failed logistics company acquisition, the very deal that had ended his career. The irony was so crushingly perfect, so cosmically cruel, that Mark let out a short, bark-like laugh that made the man next to him edge away. Julio Vance. He hadn't just taken his wife. He hadn't just humiliated him. Now, without even knowing it, he had sifted through the wreckage of Mark's career and plucked out the most valuable parts for scrap. It wasn't personal. It was just business, and that somehow made it infinitely worse. Mark Sterling's epic career-ending failure was now a minor, profitable footnote on Julio Vance's balance sheet. The bourbon, combined with the weeks of self-pity and rage, finally broke through the last dam of his restraint. He needed someone to blame. He needed a target for the black toxic sludge that was poisoning him from the inside out. There was only one person. His hands shaking, he found her number in his contacts. Amelia. He pressed the call button before he could stop himself. It rang once, twice. He expected it to go to voicemail. "Hello?" Her voice. It was calm, clear and steady. It sounded like it was coming from another world. "Amelia," he slurred the name, feeling foreign in his mouth. "It's Mark." There was a pause. He could hear the faint sound of waves in the background. "Mark, is everything okay? Is everything okay?" He laughed, the sound ugly and raw. "No, Amelia, everything is not okay. My life is over, and it's all because of you." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice turning cooler, firmer. "Don't play dumb. You and your goddamn billionaire. You waltzed into that polo match to ruin me. You did this. You and him. He bought my company's debt. Did you know that? He's picking my bones clean." "Julio doesn't even know who you are, Mark," she said, and the simple truth of the statement was more devastating than any insult. "He runs a global corporation, not a high school cafeteria. This has nothing to do with you or me. This is about your own choices." "My choices," he yelled, causing the bartender to look over with a warning glare. "I gave you everything. I made you who you were, and you threw it all away. You left me, and you destroyed me." He was waiting for the fight, for the tears, for the screaming match that would validate his rage. He didn't get it. "No, Mark," Amelia said, and her voice was filled not with anger, but with a profound and unshakable finality. "You didn't make me. You contained me. And when I left, you were the only one left in the prison you had built. I feel sorry for you. I truly do. But my life is here now, and you are not a part of it." He opened his mouth to retort, to scream, to beg, but he was cut off by the soft, definitive click of the line going dead. She had hung up on him. He stared at his phone, the screen dark. It was over. The last door had closed. The last connection to the life he had thrown away was severed. He looked up and caught his reflection in the cheap, grimy mirror behind the bar. A man with bloodshot eyes, a puffy face, and an expression of utter desolation. It was the face of a stranger, the face of a loser. He had spent his entire life trying to become a king, and in the end, he had become nothing at all. And so Mark Sterling's perfectly curated world came crashing down, not because of a market downturn, but because of his own corrosive pride. This story was never about the car or the yacht. It was never about money. It was about worth. Mark thought a person's worth was something you could buy, flaunt, and put on display. Amelia, with the help of a man who saw her true value, rediscovered that worth is something that comes from within. It's the quiet confidence, the resilience to rebuild, and the courage to choose happiness over status. True power that isn't about showing off what you have. It's about being so secure that you don't have to show off at all. If you love stories of karma, justice, and the ultimate triumph of character over ego, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more tales of when the world finally gets it right. Thank you for listening.